always a pleasure to be joined by top UFC lightweight contender Beneil Dariush, who takes on Arman Tsarukyan in the UFC Fight Night, Austin, Texas, December 2nd main event. Beneil, how's it going?
Good. How are you?
I'm doing good, thank you. It seemed like this fight was main, maybe co-main. It was kind of like Bobby Green and Dan Hooker also were kind of getting word that they could be the main event. How did it all go down from your side? Did you always know you were going to be the main event?
I did not actually. It's been a strange month, I would say, because what was it? When did I find out? So there was they reached out to me as well about fighting on what's the card this weekend? No, the is it
Madison
295
Square
or
Garden. Yeah, 295.
295? Right? They reached out to me to fight on that as well. They mentioned Dustin Poirier's name, but then it never materialized. And then I was like, okay. And then we went back to this card, and they even mentioned maybe I'll end up fighting him. And I was like, I don't. I just kept saying yes. Basically, I said sure, and then they said okay, never mind. And then 2 weeks ago, they're like, okay, we're gonna have you be main event. And I thought I was co-main event, like you said earlier. But they said I thought it was gonna be co-main event, 5 rounds, which I thought was strange. But I mean, I'll take it. It's 5 rounds. So it's been a really interesting couple of weeks. The last 4 weeks have been back and forth.
Dustin Poirier, huh? How far did those talks go, or did they just kind of bring up the idea and then it fizzled?
I don't think they went that far, to be honest with you, because they reached out to me and they said, "Do you want to do it?" I said, "Yeah, of course." He's ranked ahead of me, and he's obviously one of the best lightweights of all time. So of course I would love to have that fight. And then basically a couple of days later, they said, "Nope, we're gonna stick with the same fight." And I said, "All right, sounds good."
Were you a little bit deceived, or I know you're a guy that wants to fight everybody and all the best guys in the division, but were you a little deceived when it shifted to Arman?
Deceived or disappointed? Just
Uh,
wanna.
Disappointed maybe is a better word.
Yeah, okay. I didn't feel deceived because I had assumed I was fighting Armon anyways. Um, Disappointed? Not really, to be honest with you, because Armon is such a great challenge because he's by no means an easy fight. I'm not saying Dustin Poirier is an easier fighter or whatever, but they're both very challenging fighters. They're both very good fighters, and they bring um, different qualities to the table, different weapons to the table, and I look forward to solving the puzzle. Right. So now the puzzle is Arman Tsarukyan, and I'm just going to focus on that. If it had been Dustin Poirier, I'd be focusing on that. Really, right now at this point in my career, I enjoy solving puzzles, so that's how I started looking at these men.
And you had mentioned earlier that when there were talks with Coleman, you said 5 rounds, cool. So it seems like you prefer 5 rounds.
I've never done it, so let's see if I prefer it. I'll let you know after the fight. Once I get through it, I'll let you know if I like 5 rounds or not.
So in a way, do you look at it as in kind of a, you're in top contention? Do you see it as potentially like a necessary step as you aim for a title shot?
To be honest with you, I don't know if this really puts me closer to the title shot. Um, Especially with my track record, knowing that it takes a little bit more work for me to get title shots. I don't think this fight is going to put me, right there in the mix again. I would probably need to get one or two more fights or something like that. If I know if history if I know my history well, which I think I do, that's what I would that's what I would think. If I fought someone like Dustin Poirier, obviously, I think that could change things. But at the moment, I'm assuming I'm going to end up fighting a few more times before I get a title shot.
And when you say that, because obviously Islam's last title defense was against Volkanovski, short notice, was supposed to be Oliveira. We had Gamrat weighing in as a backup. So was part of you like, would have you rather it been Gamrat just so it can kind of clear the way a little bit in the top of the division? Do you almost feel like it being Volkanovski? I understood why it was Volkanovski, but it being Volkanovski kind of stalled the division a little.
What the reason why I want to see Gamma, not so much about the division, but because of I think it's more of an interesting matchup because Gamrot was coming off a victory and he didn't take much damage in his fight. Unfortunately for Fiziev, he got injured. But Armand didn't take. I'm sorry, Gamrot didn't take much damage. So he's going into and he's preparing now for Makhachev or whatever. I think he would have been he was much better prepared overall, and I think he would have been a much more interesting fight to watch. That was really why I would want to see that fight. I don't know if Makhachev fighting Gamrot would have made the division less, less complicated. I think it would have kind of kept things the same way there is, because we still have Charles and Justin Gaethje right there for the number one spot.
Yeah, and it appears that the UFC could be looking to rebook that Charles and Islam fight, but there are also kind of talks that could be Justin. In your opinion, who do you think it should be?
Uh, I think Charles makes sense. Obviously, it's hard to argue against what he's done. The issue is Makhachev has already beat Charles, right? So there's that. You can make it a case, and you want someone new. You want a fresh face to face Makhachev. So that's why you bring in Gaethje. But in reality, whether it's Gaethje or Charles, I think they're both deserving.
And speaking of Islam, he recently was bumped up to the number one pound for pound spot over John Jones. Did you see that? And what is your reaction to that? Do you agree?
I mean, yeah, well deserved. He just beat Volkanovski, and this time he did it clear. John is going to be out for a while, and I mean, pound for pound is a strange thing, you know. If Leon wins maybe next month, maybe they toss him back in first place. You know, not long ago you could have made a case for Aljamain Sterling. I just don't I don't really have a great grasp of the whole pound for pound thing, but man, Makhachev being up there, you can clearly make an argument for him, and I think he's a great fighter.
Were you surprised with the way he was able to finish Volkanovski round one, head kick knockout?
Yeah, of course. I was very impressed, obviously, and I understand. Volk was coming off a thumb surgery, I believe, and he wasn't as prepared as he should be. But it doesn't change the fact that what Makhachev did was very impressive, because no matter what, at the end of the day, Volkanovski is one of the best fighters in the world, and even if he's coming off the couch, he's still very dangerous and he's still very good.
Yeah, and let's talk about Arman. You had mentioned Mateusz Gamrat, obviously an opponent that you recently beat in very impressive fashion. He has a win over Arman. Did you watch that fight? And do you have is that a fight that you're going to study quite intently in preparation for Arman?
Um, yes and no. I don't watch too much in terms of, I fought this guy, so I'll watch it. I'll watch and see how he does again. I don't really do that. When I watch fights, I watch more for rhythm and habits, and you I want to get a feel of that person, and then so when I start to spar, I can ask my teammates to kind of replicate that, or when I'm shadow boxing, I can have an idea of this who I'm fighting in my mind. So I watch more for that. So if anything, I would say I watch more his fights against southpaws. Aubin Mercier, you have Makhachev, obviously, and then Gamrot as well. Gamrot switches stances, but more to see what he does when he fights southpaws and things like that. So that's really why I watch. But it's really hard to say, I fought Gamrot, and Gamrot fought him, so that's why I need to watch. It's going to make sense. It just doesn't work for me like that.
Did you think Gamrot won that fight against Arman?
Yeah, I mean, you can make a case for either guy. And I believe it really depends on that fourth round, because that spinning back fist, we don't know how much damage it did. I saw Gamrot go down, but I also saw him get right back up and take Tsarukyan down. So it really depends on that, right? Was it really? Did he really get hurt, or did he just get caught and he surprised him, so he fell? And I've noticed with Gamrot, for example, when he fought Jalen Turner, he got dropped a bunch of times, but it was almost meant nothing, because he just was like, okay, now I'll take you down. It's a weird style he has. So I don't know. I for sure I thought Gamrot won in terms of grappling, and then I thought Tsarukyan might have done more damage, but it was so close. And
And
I will
yeah.
say this. Sorry, one last thing. I will say this: Gamrat finished much better than Tsarukyan. That he had a much stronger finish, and I think that really plays in the judge's mind.
And yeah, you mentioned that your fight is going to be 5 rounds. You said there's like question marks for yourself personally, but do you see like in terms of Arman, do you feel like he slows down in the latter rounds, and that's something you could take advantage of?
Hmm, I'm not sure. I don't even know if I slow down in the later rounds. So it's one of those fights, you know. So it's all one of those things I got to figure it out. I'm looking forward to getting in there and kind of figuring out what happens in the fourth and the fifth round because I have no clue. But I will say this: um, when I fought Gamrot, it wasn't because he was tired in the third that I was able to do a little bit more. It was I just I just got a feel for him, you know. That's something I've noticed when I fight. I just start to get a feel for my opponents and their timing, and the fight gets easier for me, typically because of that. So maybe the same thing will happen with Armand. We'll see.
And Arman mixes it up usually strong grappling. So do you. So do you kind of see this fight playing out like tussling on the ground, grappling on the feet? Like how do you envision this fight playing out?
I do. I think he's going to be looking to go low and go high. By low, I mean takedowns, and then go high, I mean striking. But that's what I prepare for every day. I prepare to fight guys who can do it all, and I don't know if he does anything that would surprise me. I Once I get in there, I'll have a better idea. I will say I need to get a better idea of his strength. That's something that could be out of my expectations, but I didn't feel when I went with Gamrot, he was strong, but I didn't feel like, oh man, this guy is overwhelming me. And then let's see with Tsarukyan if it's going to be the same thing.
And I know you said that you don't necessarily feel like a win over Arman would put you in the title picture and you're used to a long road. Do you have a wish list before it's all said and done of specific names that you wish to fight before you hang it up?
Uh, that's a good question. Obviously, I want to fight the champion Makhachev. That's definitely on the list. I would love rematches, but I really haven't had any rematches to my losses. But I would love to have rematches with all my losses. That's something that's always on my mind. Guys like hmm, Dustin Poirier would be a cool fight to have, but not like a must. Really, the champion is the one I think that I really want to have an opportunity to fight him.
And when saying rematches, would Oliveira be the top of the list? Because I mean, I know you said you weren't yourself in that fight, but it also didn't play out too long, right? So you could like gauge a little bit of the fight, but at the same time, I'm sure you would have wanted to battle for longer. So does that one sting?
For sure, all my losses sting. I honestly, I never get over my losses. That's also one of the reasons why I got to where I got to. I never got over my losses. I just continue to dig and get better. So, as far as which one stings the most, obviously the Charles fight is the most recent, but I can still remember all my losses and I want them all back. So it's a really weird thing the how obsessive I could be over losses to a point where it could if I overthink it could crush me. But fortunately for me, being a devout Christian, I don't put my identity in fighting, and that really helps me just step away from it.
How many times did you rewatch the Oliveira fight?
Oh man, probably close to 10, I would say.
Okay, and what was your like biggest takeaway from it?
Just I didn't show up that night. I just no matter how I look at it, I just didn't show up that night. That's the best way I could put it, unfortunately. I wish I did. I wish I had put on a better performance and I was more myself, but it was not it was not where I was. I just didn't look good. I can't think of anything I did well.
And I'll close things out with this. You mentioned like obviously Makhachev is a fight you would want. If you could have a Mount Rushmore of greatest lightweights, what would your top five be?
Greatest lightweights, you would have to put Habib obviously there, and then if we're talking Mount Rushmores, maybe put Jens Pulver up there because he was the first champion. Um, hmm, this is a tricky question because, you know, for example, people were talking about Charles being the best lightweight of all time not long ago, right? Um, and then Tony for a while, everybody was like, it's him and Habib. But look where he's at right now. It's a really tough question. BJ Penn could be up there. Ay, ay, ay. This is actually kind of stressful. I'm just gonna do this. Let's go with Habib, Jens Pulver, and then we'll put Tony Ferguson up there for what he did because he was like almost like a linear champ. And then yeah, I don't know the last one honestly. I'm kind of stuck. I want to say BJ Penn, but his time at lightweight wasn't so long.
And like I know recency bias plays a lot into like when people are making lists, and sometimes these legends will stick around for too long. So the record, like BJ Penn, the way he finished out his career, doesn't allow him to get the credit he deserves for people who haven't been watching the sport from day one, right? So do you ever think about that when it comes to your career? Obviously, you're still at the top of your game, but when you see guys like BJ Penn and the way they fought out like for that long and just maybe longer than people want them to. Do you ever think about that when it comes to yourself? Because I know you're a guy who loves the sport so much.
Yeah, that's definitely a fear I have. Here's two ways I know I'm gonna be done. One is one day I'm gonna walk into that octagon and I'm just not gonna feel it. The feeling that I have that it's not just the jitters and the nerves and whatever, but there's a freedom in there that I just can't explain to people. Those 15 minutes or 25 minutes, there's a freedom to it that I just can't explain how awesome it is. And then number two is this. If I got some young punks outworking me, if I have some young guys doing more than I'm doing, that's when I know I'm done.
Oh, you're still at the top of your game very much. Beneil, I appreciate you doing this. Thank you so much for your time and best of luck on December 2nd.
My pleasure. You have a great one.